Call it the pinnacle of talking season. It is the climax of the offseason and talking season across college football. And of course, nobody does talking season quite like the SEC, where it means more in season, off season, talking season. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by. Best discussion, debate, and analysis right here. Thanks to you. Appreciate you stopping by. We have the call-in line open. It's the first day of SEC Media Days coming from Dallas, typically in Birmingham or technically Hoover, Alabama. I think it's jumped around a few different places, but throughout the years, that has been the foremost destination of the SEC Media Days, something that I covered and attended on location for 6 or 7 straight years, 1994, through 2000. SEC Media Days. I think, again, it has jumped around, but Birmingham has been that main location. But of course, trying to welcome and integrate Oklahoma and Texas into the mix. Therefore, we see the SEC venturing out to Dallas, Texas this week. Few notes before we start to dive into the news of the day, and what has been talked about would be Fresno State head coach Jeff Tedford has stepped away from his position there at Fresno State, unfortunately, due to health concerns. And Jeff Tedford has stepped away from other jobs in the past and from this job on occasion because of health concerns in the past. So this is unfortunate news. Jeff Tedford at the age of 62. As it reads in CBS Sports today, with just over a month before the start of the 2024 college football season, Fresno State will have to move forward with someone other than the legendary Jeff Tedford coaching its football program. Tedford stepping down as the Bulldogs head coach due to health reasons, per the school. Tedford completed 2 seasons in his second stint with the Bulldogs. He was forced to resign as Fresno State's head coach due to health reasons following the 2019 season. So 2019, in steps Caleb DeBoer, who then coaches there for 1 season, moves on to Washington, and then Tedford is back at Fresno State. So the school ultimately rehired him in December of 2021. So he has coached just these 2 seasons of 22 and 23, and unfortunately has to step down. Quote, "It is with sad emotions that following my recent medical checkup, it is clear that due to health concerns, my family and I have made the decision to step aside as Fresno State's head coach and allow someone else to lead the football program," Tedford said in a statement. So current assistant head coach and linebackers coach Tim Skipper was announced as interim coach, and he played linebacker at Fresno State from 1997 to 2000. And he's had assistant head coaching positions and other coaching positions throughout the sport since then. Tedford had to miss the bowl game against New Mexico, the New Mexico Bowl last year, 45 and 22 overall, 19 and 8 over the last 2 seasons. So again, a tremendous football coach, and we wish him the best because that's much more important than football. Jeff Tedford needing to step away, health concerns again for him. So it's obviously come to a place where he does not believe that he can fully manage and lead the football program. So again, our prayers go out to Jeff Tedford and his family. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Let's get to SEC Football Media Days. We have it lined up all week to have guests here to step in and talk about SEC football and their particular team. So, of course, on this very day, we are focusing on Ole Miss, South Carolina, LSU, and, Vandy. Vandy showing up on day 1. So Vandy is closing out the day on day 1. We will take your comments and questions there in the chat. And again, we have some folks who are scheduled to stop by from our media contacts that are on location there at SEC Media Days. Keep in mind that it's realignment week here at the Voice of College Football. So be looking out for those videos. We matched up Clemson and Florida State and integrated them into the Big 12. So check out the video from today and future videos coming out. We've looked at all sorts of configurations and possibilities there. Had a great discussion over the weekend on the Florida State channel concerning Florida State and that possibility of FSU to the Big 12. Don't discard it. It is a real possibility. Is it a probability? I don't believe so. I don't believe it's a probability, but a possibility. Will SEC be in the running for Florida State? Well, certainly Florida State would love to go to the SEC or the Big Ten. That is the destination. That's why they are fighting their way out of the ACC. We've got an SEC channel, folks. Please check it out, and please subscribe. If you're on the SEC channel right now watching us, please subscribe right there. You can see that we deliver content on a regular basis several times per week on the SEC channel. This is what I picked up from SEC Media Days. And of course, again, the SEC does it bigger and better than everybody else. They are the authors, much like the conference championship game and other aspects of college football. They are the authors of the media days. I don't know if the SEC did it first. We would have to look that up, but they have done it the biggest and the best. My first SEC media days was in 1994. It was not on television, and there was barely internet at that point. It was available, but it was clumsy and awkward and delayed. And my first interview at SEC Media Days, actually, it was not my first interview, but it was the first interview that was significant enough to remember. Not that there weren't tons of big-time coaches and players there at SEC Media Days in 1994. Gene Stallings, Steve Spurrier come to mind. But Tommy Tuberville was kind enough as first-year head coach of Ole Miss. That was in 1995 SEC Media Days, to stick around and miss a great deal of the coaches banquet down the street to stick around and appear with us on the 6 o'clock news. So since then, and for a number of other reasons, during his coaching stay at Ole Miss, and when I was covering him when he was at Ole Miss and Auburn, I've got a soft spot in my heart for one Tommy Tuberville. All right, let's get to the here and now. That would involve LSU and Brian Kelly, year 3. Brian Kelly noted today that year 3 has been good to him at his other stops, that he has taken over a program that has always needed resurrection, that has always needed a revival. LSU as well, coming off that 2020 disaster and roster deterioration. Brian Kelly faced not a typical LSU talent pool. And so now here we are in year 3, and if it follows the pattern of Central Michigan, Cincinnati, Notre Dame, then Brian Kelly may spring a surprise on us this season. I have stated it several times during this offseason that for LSU to be successful this year, I think they are one of the clear teams in college football that have a clear dividing line. Notre Dame's in this boat. Penn State's in this boat. Make the playoff. Make the playoff. Just make the playoff. If you perform well in the playoff, if you win a game in the playoff or 2 or 3, or make that miracle run, yes, that would be phenomenal. But make the playoff. We have programs above that need to make the playoff and succeed in the playoff. And then we've got programs where the playoff is a goal, but it's not necessarily a probable goal. It's not a probable result. It's a possibility. It's a possibility at places like Wisconsin, and within the SEC, a possibility at places like Auburn or Texas A&M. But for LSU, for Penn State, Notre Dame, get to the playoff. Year 3, Brian Kelly talked a lot about defense. He talked about what they've had to do on the defensive side of the ball. And it really was very much a Brian Kelly session. Classic Brian Kelly in front of the media. I did not see his opening remarks from the podium. I watched the media interview that went for about 17 minutes. And Brian Kelly focused a lot on defense. and the process at LSU. He will explain the process to you, not the nuts and bolts, not the granular, but he is very process oriented and deals with the media in such a way. Talks about player acquisition, player development, about assessing players in the high school ranks and in the transfer portal and determining whether they are a fit at LSU, whether they've got what it takes. And in terms of the defense, revamping the defensive staff because it was woeful at LSU last year. It is almost inconceivable that a team, a program with the talent pool and the resources of LSU could field a defense that bad. And their performances from week to week, did they play a good defensive game against a decent team? They shut out Army 62-0. But did they play anyone in the SEC where they did not give up? Missouri torched them. Bama torched them. Florida torched them. Mizzou torched them. Ole Miss really torched them. Auburn didn't torch anyone, so they took care of Auburn. Arkansas scored 31 points. Arkansas couldn't score against anyone. Arkansas scored 31 on LSU. So Blake Baker and this LSU defense. Brian Kelly talked about year 3 accountability, that the USC game will be a show-me game that is going to show a lot about his football team and who they are. We heard from Garrett Nussmeier, the new starting quarterback. Brian Kelly said he can't be Joe Burrow or Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels had to hear about Joe Burrow and his Heisman Trophy, and now Garrett Nussmeier needs to hear about Jaden Daniels and has to have that thrown in his face, try to live up to those expectations. He's not that player. He's definitely not that player from the standpoint of style. Now, whether he can be that good of a player in production in the passing game, it's possible. 40 touchdowns and 4 picks, though, is a bit difficult to replicate. I think Burrow's line was 60-6. I know Oklahoma under Lincoln Riley has been the cradle of quarterbacks during the last 10 or 15 years. But wow. Put those two ratios together. Burrow went 60-6 TD to picks, and Daniels goes 40-4. So again, Garrett Nussmeier needs to be his own guy. We heard from Garrett Nussmeier. I'll go through that. Brian Kelly did a pretty thorough job of explaining the transfer portal, how they acquire players. And I think he's genuinely satisfied. We'll use that word, content, optimistic. I'm not going to use the term happy, optimistic about his defense. He went through a number of players in their second seasons, whether that's guys right out of high school in their second seasons as sophomores or redshirt freshmen, and then guys through the transfer portal that he believes, okay, this guy was a freshman last year. He developed really well. He's ready to make an impact. Transfer portal guys, even maybe from a year prior, that are ready to make an impact after now development. Harold Perkins. The topic of Harold Perkins is probably the most talked about topic in Louisiana, I would think, these days. How to use Harold Perkins. Well, they bulked him up. He is about 10 or 12 pounds heavier. He says 225, and I guess he was 210, so 15 pounds. And he's going to play on the inside. I don't believe that's the spot for him, but Blake Baker knows better, and LSU knows better. I just watched the guy play, and I think 2 years ago, he was a wrecking crew. He was a game changer. He was the best defensive player in the country. And he was not the best defensive player in the country last year, largely because he was confined. But they believe that is his best destination for this team. Or more so, Brian Kelly talks about his NFL potential, and that's where he will develop the best to play in the NFL, is on the inside. I don't know that Brian Kelly is being paid to produce NFL players. That should be the byproduct of winning games and having great talented players that you sign and then develop. But that is the game plan for Harold Perkins. On the offensive line, Brian Kelly said that their offensive line coach, Bo Davis, has made it a goal to win the Joe Moore Award. Put up the plaque, put up the whatever to notify everyone in his office that they want to win the Joe Moore Award at LSU. And by all accounts, they are prepared to do it, and they are good enough to do it. We heard from Harold Perkins, the percolator. So I guess this guy's got like a zillion nicknames. And so the media threw a few more at him that he didn't seem to care for. But percolator seems to be the one that he goes with. And again, he is 15 pounds heavier this year, but that is apparently not going to hurt his explosiveness. Garrett Nussmeier, presented with a question about transferring. He had all those opportunities to transfer. He was a high level prospect, and he has waited and waited and waited. He has seen some key moments. Started the SEC championship game 2 years ago. Performed remarkably against Wisconsin in the bowl game this past year. Put up jaw-dropping statistics in that game. Looked great. He came into an Auburn game late. He came into the Bama game last year in the third quarter when Jaden Daniels went down. And he's been hit or miss in those opportunities. He's looked really good. Again, the Wisconsin game in particular, but he's let them down a few times in relief. He went to the Peyton Manning, it's the Manning Academy. It's not the Peyton Manning Academy, but talked about what he learned there. Building relationships with his teammates throughout the season being the most important thing. And again, with the opportunity to transfer, and what most quarterbacks would have done would have been to transfer. But he said he believes he did what God wanted him to do, to stay there, stick it out, learn, grow, and he trusted God, and this is the result. So he's the starting quarterback this year, of course. The Oklahoma media showed up for sure. Every player, I watched 4 or 5 player interviews, and the coaches and the Oklahoma media, they have descended on Dallas. They are there. These players are getting hit with the first questions about Oklahoma. Garrett Nussmeier, Oklahoma is going to enter Tiger Stadium, Death Valley, for the final game of the season. Can you let us know what that's going to be like? Mason Taylor, LSU tight end, he showed up as well. And one of the themes for LSU was also that it is a player-led team. The coaches do not have to micromanage this team, that they have the leadership in place to self-manage in the locker room. That's what they say. That's what they say. I don't doubt that. I'm just saying we don't know. And that's the goal of every team, every championship team, that the players should be able to police the locker room before the coaches. If the coaches have to manage the personalities in the locker room and the accountability and the leadership, then you don't have leaders on the team. The Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. The Amazon link. Here's the deal. This is the one way that you can support the voice of college football without spending a penny. The Amazon link, it's in the description section of all the videos, including this one. Please grab it and please use it. And it will be the same shopping experience. I guarantee you, you will not have an issue with it it will serve exactly as the link that you use right now to enter Amazon. It will keep track of all your purchases, and it will recognize that you are the person that's logging on with an Amazon account. All of those things are transparent. I've seen it play out with people right next to me going into the Amazon account using our link. So please do that. Support the voice of college football. Shane Beamer, South Carolina. He's in year 4. I believe I produced a hot seat coach video this offseason. I believe I did. I usually do. I think it's out there. And I sure should have put Shane Beamer on it. I probably did. It is year 4, and he went 5-7 last year. So it went from year 1, nice job, Shane Beamer. You took a bad football program, depleted roster, mess of a quarterback situation. He had no quarterback. He played 4 quarterbacks that first season and was able to piece something together. But here in year 4, the trajectory isn't real appealing right now. Right on time, Will Gunter, 107 at the game. I'm just diving into a little Shane Beamer analysis after watching his stay in front of the media today. You can join Will on the all-new early game. Again, 107.5 the game. Will, how's it going?
It's going good, man. Of course, it's incredibly hot here. I think the heat index is like 108. So good luck to anybody else out there that's braving the weather here in the South. But it's a good time. But it's fun. Glad that we finally got some football going today.
So yeah, it's year 4. So Shane Beamer needs to get things cranked up here. Needs to show something, especially since it started well. And I was just starting to explain to everyone how that first year looked. And considering the depleted roster, he did a great job. And then they take off in year 2 and it's better. And then last year, sure, you can look at injuries and other things, but with a quarterback who did more than anybody you would think of will be able to do today on this roster, only 5 wins. So your thoughts about Shane Beamer and what he had to say today?
Well, number one, I think in terms of just talking about Shane Beamer, it is an important year. I don't think he's on the hot seat. I think anybody that's taken it that far is being a little overreactive and dramatic. But there is no doubt that South Carolina has to get back to a bowl game, whether that's 6 wins and winning the bowl game to give himself a above 500 year, or getting to 7 wins. I think 7 is when it's all said and done. You've got to reach 7. So again, maybe that's 7-6 or 7-5, and then maybe go win the bowl game and get to 8. But last year obviously was a massive disappointment. There's no other way around that. They blew a game, absolutely blew a game to Florida that they should have won, that would have made them bowl eligible. Give up a 4th and 17 there, and actually had the ball thrown behind the line of scrimmage and should have made the tackle, but didn't manage to do that. And then the Clemson game, really, it was there. It was a great opportunity for them to pick up a second victory in a row over Clemson and really establish some dominance. And they opened that game by throwing a backwards pass that is dropped, that Clemson picks up and runs in for a touchdown and completely takes all the air out of the stadium. So you are right. This is an important year, but again, it's not one. I don't think if he were to go 5-7 or 4-8, I don't think that would get him fired. I think he's got another year that he will get to have. But I do think you have to look at the results of the games. You can't go 4-8, basically lose 8 conference games, or lose 7 conference games and 1 to Clemson, and in those games get blown out. It might be a little bit different if you lose 6 of those by, say, a touchdown and you look competitive, because there are some pieces on the roster moving forward that are very nice. And then as far as today, I quite frankly have no idea what he said. The opening statement was 17 minutes. I think he repeated himself twice. He took questions. I liked what he did, but he was up there, I think, a full 32 minutes, and I'm not sure what we learned, if anything, from Shane Beamer today.
It was funny, Will, because in searching for various clips online, I clicked on last year's news conference and listened to it for about 30 seconds before I determined, okay, this is last year. But he said, my kids were all over me because I was so long-winded last year. I'm going to keep it down because I got just nailed for being up here forever. So I'm going to keep it tight. I'm
He
like,
didn't do it. He made mention of that in the press conference. He actually said that he I think he won the award for longest opening statement last year, and said he's going to try and keep it um, a little bit shorter, and then promptly went about another 7 minutes to get to that 17-minute mark. And again, I will, in all seriousness, I do like how he handled it, because I think this is a team, and I've said this from January. South Carolina has been very good in the past with their creative team, putting out Twitter videos and promoting the program and showing the chemistry that the program has, and how those guys are coached. When you go 5-7, fan base doesn't want to see that. They don't want to see you having a really good time at your facility. And I've also said that I don't think they need to brag on anybody. They need to let these guys go out and kind of earn their reputation through games, and kind of the same thing with the team. So they've done a good job, I think, this offseason of kind of staying quiet, of not putting out all those videos. They would have one of them. Again, I think they played hide and seek in the facility 2 years ago. They put out one that was kind of the Full House video. They put out one that was kind of like The Office. Was it 2 years ago in Atlanta? He had the one where he put the shades on and danced around before he came. I really applaud them, because I feel like they've read the room, if you will. They understand, hey, we kind of need to back this down and win football games. And then I think also today he did a good job of not trying to oversell Lenora Sellers. He did a good job of not trying to oversell his defense, which actually should be better. He did talk about them adding depth there, but he didn't try to oversell us on a player, on a position grouping, of anything of that nature, which I think is a really good thing. I think that's what they have to do. Now we're going to get him um, locally next Thursday. I think the 25th is what it is. They do his media golf outing, and so we'll hear from him again then. But I do commend him. He was long winded. That's why I say I don't know what we learned, because he somehow got 30 minutes in there, but it was the way it should have been. He didn't need to overhype this team, and kind of build up anticipation. You just got to go out there and let them play starting August 31st.
well, you brought up Sellers. So they go from a much different quarterback situation last year, established starter, veteran, pocket passer, guy who's got an NFL future, to an athlete. And Shane actually mentioned, hey, we've got 4 athletes at quarterback. It's just a much different situation, and it's good to have athletes at quarterback. So is this Sellers and that's it? Or are they still determining what they're going to do and he still has to fight for this job?
Yeah, privately, it's going to be Sellers, and that's the direction they're going. Publicly, I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more that it's an open competition. He did name Lenora Sellers the starter at one of the club meetings that they go to, kind of in May. But it's pretty well known that it's going to be Lenora Sellers, the guy for the first few games. And how does he perform, and really kind of go out and make things happen? I mean, this is a young man that, again, he in talking with people that I still talk with in recruiting, he got an injury his junior year, didn't get to play, came back his senior year, had incredible stats. I think it was over 50 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, led his team to a state championship, didn't go to any of the camps. A couple of people with 24/7 Sports that I still deal with think that if he'd have been seen, he could have ended up being a 5-star quarterback. And then, as well as that, the couple plays we have seen him play last year, he made, I granted, it was against Furman and Vanderbilt, so we don't want to get too carried away, but he did make some really, really good plays in those 2 ball games that have caught people's attention. It's going to be exciting to see him. I do think having a guy who can run, having a guy who can get out there and run around is going to make a massive difference, as opposed to Spencer Rattler, who could beat you with his arm, but wasn't necessarily going to beat you with his legs.
Is this team going to be stout enough up front on both sides of the ball to compete? And obviously we need to see it, and you can't necessarily answer that question, but do you get strong indicators that they're better than what they were last year?
Yeah, there's 2 parts. There's 2 parts to that question, and I'll start with yes. And I actually think they've recruited really well along the lines of scrimmage. You look at it, they had Tree Babalade, who was a big time 4-star recruit 2 years ago. Trovon Ball started a lot last year, was a 4-star recruit. The best offensive lineman, Marquis Anderson, got injured and didn't get to play very much last year. That was 3 4-stars they brought in. Then this past year, they brought in a 5-star tackle in Josiah Thompson. who was an All-American, is really well talked about and known about. But with all that being said, the biggest concern is not the talent, I think. The biggest concern is the strength and conditioning program. You look at the last 2 years, I think South Carolina's been okay on the offensive line. However, they haven't been able to go out and push around Eastern Illinois and Georgia State in openers. Last year, they gave up 7 sacks in the first half. They haven't been strong enough. It's been to me, it's not a talent issue, it's a strength and conditioning issue. And right now, there you go into the SEC, you've got to spend your offseason really getting bulked up, getting strong, physically strong to handle these SEC defensive tackles and defensive linemen. And as I had one person down there that interacts with the team said they all look great. They can all go to the beach and pick up women, and it's a fantastic, great looking group of offense and defensive linemen. But that doesn't mean they're strong enough to handle defensive linemen in the SEC, and that's what has got to be fixed. That's what I'm interested to see early on in the season, because you look at those first 3 games with Old Dominion, then you get a physical Kentucky team. LSU's physically imposing, and they're going to come in big, bad, and strong. South Carolina's got to be stronger in it, and so that's what I'm interested to see with the strength and conditioning program.
Will Gunter hosted the early game on 107.5 The Game there in Columbia, South Carolina. So whether it's the other coaches and players that hit the podium today from Ole Miss, Vandy, and LSU, or it's been a while since we talked to you, Will, anything in the offseason around this league that piques your interest that you think is intriguing?
Well, I think the continued discussion of the 9-game conference schedule for us, for South Carolina fans, since Clemson is a rival and they're not in conference. If you went to the 9 games, now you would look at South Carolina essentially having a 10-game schedule. And what do you do with those other 2 games? Do you schedule cupcakes to try and pick up more victories to get yourself an opportunity to be in a college football playoff or even a bowl? I think that's really, really interesting, especially for us, because again, I love the setup right now of the 8 games. South Carolina typically plays another good opponent. This year they actually do not, but they typically play another really good opponent, such as next year will be Virginia Tech. I think they've got North Carolina State lined up in more years to come. Miami is lined up in a couple of years. And with all that being said, what I think that's really, I do think that's where it's going. I think 9 games is where it's going. It's what I expect, but it's going to be really interesting. And then as far as that, it's just continuing to watch Oklahoma and Texas come into this league, and I'm really fascinated to see how Oklahoma in particular handles it, given that they lost Dylan Gabriel, who transferred to Oregon. They lost a bunch of offensive linemen. I know Brent Venables has been here, but I'm really intrigued to see if Oklahoma can step into this league and be the powerhouse that they've been over the last 30 years.
Will, what's going on mornings there at the game there, 107.5?
Yeah, we're now in Florence, South Carolina. We're in Myrtle Beach. We're hoping to enter a new market in the next 45 days, I guess, and so excited about that. But other than that, we are right now rolling right along. Obviously, we'll spend a lot of tomorrow morning discussing what we think we heard. We actually did a coach's bingo card because, as I've said, this is the most boring event that we have to talk about because coaches have become so uptight about saying something. We laughed this morning a good bit last year at this event. Tonka Hemingway, the defensive lineman, got a very innocent question. Hey, what are some of the toughest venues you've been to in the SEC? Well, he leaves out Georgia. I mean, he didn't mean to, just left him out. He'd only been there once. So South Carolina went back to Georgia this year, and Kirby Smart spent the entire pre-game week leading up to it saying, "Oh, this guy doesn't think our environment's difficult. Fans need to show up." So it's one of those things you get the SEC media day and you don't say anything. So we had a coach's bingo card today to see what cliches they would hit. And I think Shane did a good job of hitting just about every one of them.
Yeah, it's a bit robotic, but the SEC, it just seems to get bigger and better every year, or bigger every year for sure, in terms of the scope and the magnitude and the media coverage and the whole deal. Will, we appreciate you stopping by, breaking things down for us.
Always glad to do it, man. Y'all take care.
Will Gunter, the all-new early game there on 107.5 The Game. We've known Will for a long, long time and appreciate him stopping by, breaking down South Carolina football. And again, on 107.5 The Game, they do that each and every day. We heard that Shane BEAMER is leaning a little on Dawn Staley, the women's basketball coach, to bring her in to help with recruiting, that she's become such a star that a lot of the recruits ask to meet Dawn Staley and speak with her. So he has to set aside time and try to book time with her to speak to the football recruits. So that is the story from South Carolina. And again, my take on LSU in particular. We also had Ole Miss at the podium and Vanderbilt, and have not heard anything out of Vandy or Ole Miss myself in particular. We should have an Ole Miss report forthcoming. When I think Vandy and SEC Media Days now, I think two things. First thing that comes to mind is something that's been going on for years. If you see the schedule that comes out for SEC Media Days, Big Ten Media Days, fill in the blank. The ACC kickoff, we had the Big 12. I would think it would be less so with the Big 12 because of the parity in the league and the parity of levels of play and levels of program and brand. But certainly in the SEC, they sandwich the bad programs. They sandwich the bad programs with the great programs, and they balance out the days. You're not going to load up Vandy, Kentucky, Missouri, and Arkansas on the final day because 90% of Dallas will be empty and they will leave town. The media will be gone. They've got to strategically place the programs in a certain way to put Vandy in there with LSU and Ole Miss. That helps Vandy today, that people stick around and will listen to Vandy on a Monday when everybody's charged up. By Thursday, the place is going to be a bit drained. The vibe, the energy is going to be a bit deflated by day 4 on Thursday. So that's the one thing I think of when I think Vandy is nobody wants to stick around for Vandy. I remember, again, doing this for 7 consecutive years, going to SEC Media Days. And it was no different then. 25 years ago, Vandy was the least draw. And so they had to sandwich Vandy in between Alabama and Auburn, for example, to make sure people stuck around for Vandy. The other thing I think of when it's Vandy and SEC Media Days is the statement that Clark Lee made 1 year ago at SEC Media Days. Now, this was after he might have felt a little, there might have been a little chest pumping here, might have felt really good about himself and his program at the time because they had just come off wins in November over Kentucky and Florida. They beat Kentucky and Florida at the end of 2022. So he goes into 23 Media Days, and Clark Lee states, and I know he didn't mean it this way, but he didn't explain himself, and this is how he stated it. We want to have the greatest football program in the country. I think he meant in totality, meaning that if you've got the highest GPA and you've got some amazing culture, however that could be determined or evaluated, and then on top of that, you win 7 games at Vandy, you can call yourself the best football program in the country. But that has stuck with me. I found that rather amusing. We had a caller for a minute. They have dropped off. Unfortunately, we had them come in at the same time that we were talking to Will. So please grab the link. It's in the description section of the video, which I rarely think of, but I did this time. So if you go to the description section of this video, you can grab the link and we can talk SEC football. We want to focus on the teams today, but we don't need to. You can talk about anything concerning the SEC. This also doesn't just kick off SEC football media days. This fine day in July also kicks off our programming changes here at the Voice of College Football. So starting today, we will be live every day taking your calls. This is the beginning of football season. Here it is. It's right now. I know the Big 12 went last week. Not discarding the Big 12 in any way. I wouldn't ever do that. I would not think about discarding the Big 12. But starting today, we will be live every day taking your calls. And what that means is that throughout this week, SEC football media days, boom, we're here. Then next week, we've got the ACC and the Big Ten. So again, afternoons, we're looking at 4 p.m. Eastern time every day, Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern time during the next 2 weeks. And then we will take it into fall camp after next week, which means I will be here. We're looking at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And then once we hit the season, and we'll produce a video and we will make posts that you can see the entire programming schedule. But the way we've got it structured right now, we're looking at 10 a.m. Eastern time every morning with you. But on Thursdays and Fridays with football games, we're going to go live with post-game call-in shows on Thursdays and Fridays. And then during the season, add a Sunday show at 11 a.m. Eastern time. 11 a.m. Eastern time on Sundays to get you some more post-game analysis from, of course, our Saturday shows. After all the football games on Saturday, we go live with you and take your calls late night on Saturday, and then we'll turn it around Sunday morning. For some of you folks who can't stay up late, don't want to stay up late, you can catch us on Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern time when we've had a few hours to let Saturday's results settle in, sink in, and we'll get you prepared for and lead you right up to the NFL kickoff at 1 o'clock every Sunday. So how about that? Mr. Jackson Johnson stepping us for it again, as he typically does, has gifted a football, Voice of College Football membership. Thank you for that, Jackson. So very kind of you. Jackson is one of the key components to our new X launch. Check it out here at the Voice of College Football. We are just about 2 weeks into this venture. And if you are not on X, and if you're not familiar, that's Twitter, the former Twitter. If you're not familiar and you're not on X, I am not encouraging you to get a Twitter/X account in any way. But if you are, or if you would like to get an account, I'm not discouraging you either, because this may be the sole reason why you should do it right here, is we have fun talking college football and analyzing college football. That's what we do. So this is our new official account for the Voice of College Football Network. And you've got my top 25 that actually makes sense, preseason edition. You will see breaking news. And our latest post, I have not seen this myself, but this comes your way per Justin Adams. The top 10 brands in college football. This should be interesting. Let's see what we got here. Now, of course, when you say the top 10 brands in college football, that is certainly up for interpretation of what a brand is. Should have an idea of what that is. But that could be taken in a number of directions. So, according to Justin, Alabama is number 1. Ohio State is number 2. Texas, 3. Michigan is 4. Notre Dame, 5. Oklahoma, 6. Georgia, 7. Oregon, LSU, and USC. How do we feel about that? Would love to see your comments on that one. So please give me a call. So while we are waiting to talk more SEC football media days, yes, please just let me know what you think about this list. These are the top 10 brands in college football. I think it's a pretty darn good list. Sure, I could debate it. I could offer up some suggestions of other programs that could be in the top 10. Who else could be in the top 10? Penn State, maybe. Clemson, maybe. Possibly Tennessee, possibly Nebraska, possibly. That's about as far as that list can go. As far as I'm concerned, I can't think of anybody else that would really have that much of an argument of placing in the top 10 in the sport in terms of brand. I think that's a pretty tight top 10. And whether Georgia's 4, Georgia's 7, or 3, or 9, I think this is a combination of historic brand power and current brand power is what it appears to be. And all of those brands are historic brands outside of Oregon, which is not. Oregon is certainly a newcomer to the field of having any type of influence in college football. It's really in the last 10 or 15 years. But that is, I got to praise that list. Again, you could argue Ohio State number 1. You could argue Michigan number 1. You could argue Notre Dame number 1. Those are the 3 other brands that I would argue number 1. I'm sure some Texas fans would argue that they are number 1, but they just have not been any good for so long. And I think that has tarnished their brand. And I think that has tarnished their popularity and their relevance because up until last season, I think a lot of college football nation has lost interest in Texas football because they just have not been any good for so long that they had become Nebraska. And so they've had one big season. Let's see if they can continue that. It's a credit to Notre Dame in a sense that they can rank that high despite not being an elite football team on the field since when? It could be argued that the last time Notre Dame was elite was 1993-94. Some people would argue 2015, 2018, that those teams were elite. 2012, they went to the BCS championship game. But when you were clearly trampled and nowhere close to being competitive in those games, and you backdoored your way into those games in a sense, I don't think that is elite. And I also don't think elite is a one-year component. I believe you have to show some staying power. So to me, Notre Dame has not been elite since 1993-94, but I do not in any way have an issue with them being number 5 in the sport. Alabama's elite now. Ohio State, Texas, Michigan. Well, Texas, I think, needs to prove it. Are elite now. Oklahoma's fallen off of elite, but they're still close, and they've been elite very recently. Georgia, of course, is probably the best program in the country right now. Oregon's elite. LSU is fringe elite. They're not elite. They've not been elite since 2019, and that was a one-year wonder. LSU has really not been elite on the field consistently since Saban into Miles, late 2000s, 2007, of course, 2011, they played in championship games, and USC is 10 or 12 or 15 years away from being removed from being elite in 2008-9, but the brand is extremely strong. This is an interesting list. It's a good list. Man, I think that one's airtight. My salute to you, Justin. Good job. Matthew Miller stopping by with this one. Texas is the number one brand, most college football revenue by a lot. Not based on the metrics I've seen. It's not by a lot. Ohio State, I believe their football program made more money than Texas did last year, or whether that was the year before. Yeah, I don't think it's all about making money. I just don't think. I think this 12 or 13-year lull of Texas football has just worn down the college football nation concerning Texas, and they have to prove that they are an elite program again. And one season doesn't prove it to me. I think that they're going to continue this. I think that they have the right coach, whom I have doubted until last season. And they've got so much in terms of resources. And shoot, that's the bottom line term right there. That covers everything. They've got the resources to propel them into the future to continue to do what they did this past season and be even better. But so Matthew Miller, obviously that's a biased opinion, but it's his opinion and it's got validity to it. It's not a ridiculous statement. There can be an argument that Texas is number one. I don't believe they're really in the argument right this second, but it's not a ridiculous claim. It's not like saying Kansas State's the number one brand in college football. But yeah, I just my experience in observing our conversations on here, who's interested in what, how many people are interested in what teams, and what people are talking about online and so forth, that Texas has just kind of drifted off, that people have gotten sick of all this hype in the offseason, and then 7-5, and then 5-7, and then 7-5, and then 5-7 over and over and over and over and over and over, that there really hasn't been that much attention given to Texas. I don't know that their players have had much attention in the last 12 or 13 years. The average college football fan could name a lot of players off of most of these teams from the last 10, 12, 13 years. They couldn't name many Texas players. I'm talking not like Mr. Hardcore that knows everything, everybody. I'm not talking about fringe fan that knows nobody but 3 players in the nation. I'm talking about like a general, pretty well studied college football fan that spends his day or her day on Saturday watching college football, maybe like some other sports. So gets away from college football a little during the offseason, but is really in tune with college football, that knows, for example, the Alabama quarterback, their running back, their best wide receiver, 3 or 4 defensive players, maybe an offensive lineman, that knows the core of the team and the best players, and that's their general knowledge of team to team among the best teams in the country. There aren't that many players that people have known from Texas in the last 12 or 13 years. There have not been many Bijan Robinsons. So, yeah, to me, Texas is not the number one brand in college football. To me, it's an argument between Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, and Notre Dame. Dave was not listening to me. This is often the case. So there's nothing wrong. I don't expect everyone to pick up on everything I just stated, but I think I repeatedly said in the last 12 or 13 years, in the last 12 or 13 years, in the last 12 or 13 years. I didn't say about Vince Young. I was not talking about 2005. I was not talking about 20 years ago. I was talking about in the last 12 or 13 years, because Texas has been down in the last 12 or 13 years. Oh, well, Dave, I apologize if I took your comment the wrong way. So you were apparently backing me up on that Vince Young is the last guy that you remember from Texas. Again, I try to take what I know because I'm paid and I take it seriously to know more than all of you. Not that I do, but that's what I'm paid to do, and that's what I should do. So I know in your typical year, when it was 2017 and we were at this point in the offseason, I would be able to tell you these are 3 Texas offensive linemen. Here's their tight end. Here's like 4 wide receivers. And, I could name 20 guys off the team. But the typical college football fan that's even a rabid college football fan, you guys have jobs and other things to do. You can't know everyone. I don't believe that Texas really has stood out. Kevin, I don't think is, again, paying attention. In the last 12 or 13 years, they went to a national championship game in 2009. They were down the next year. They had like 1 or 2 okay seasons after that under Mac Brown, like 9-4 seasons. But basically since 2009, they didn't do anything. They had one pop-up year, Tom Herman. They went to the Big 12 championship game. They beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. They finished barely top 10, fringe top 10. That's been like their one between 2009 and 2023. That was their one season. And that wasn't really, they lost 4 games. It's not like they were some powerhouse. They were good. And it's not like at any point during the season anyone thought that they were competing for a national championship. So even their best season, they were nowhere close to being a championship level team. Yes, Colt McCoy was prior to the years I'm talking about. So look at Dave. If we use Dave as the barometer, he can name a few players on the Texas team now. So they're trending in the right direction. It's day 1 of SEC Media Days, and we will have guests each and every day. We've got about 3 other people lined up for today with Vandy, with Ole Miss, and with LSU, in addition to South Carolina. We've talked some South Carolina with Will Gunter from the early game. And I did not watch Greg Sankey's opening statements. I'm going to go back and do that. So after we get off here and I do a few other things that need to be accomplished this afternoon, I'm going to go back and watch Greg Sankey's opening statement, because that is the most important statement of the day, is what Greg Sankey has to say. It just simply is. Number one, I respect the guy. Number one, he's leading what is the best football playing league in the country and has been for 15 or 20 years plus. And then on top of that, it's arguably the most important and the most influential league. It has been the most influential league. I don't know if it's maintaining that position, but it's right there. And he's a smart guy who has done an outstanding job of leading this conference. And so there is no question that he always has something to say of significance that's meaningful, that's well thought out. There are times in which I've disagreed with his presentation, or more so that he hasn't necessarily been unbiased or objective in his analysis of the sport across the board. Of course, he is promoting his league. So we will take in those comments, and if I find something worth noting to object to or to highlight in any way, then you will see a video from me on Greg Sankey's statement. Matthew coming back with this one. Matthew, I'm going to have to reimburse you. College football revenue. Texas, 182 million. Georgia's second at 152. It is about brand. The Longhorn is the brand, not the players. The Longhorn logo is worldwide. Well, that, again, could be stated by a bunch of brands. Yeah. I don't run into I don't know that I've ever run into a Texas fan in my. I'm sure I have at some point. I had to have run into a Texas fan in person at some point in my life. I will say that I dated someone in Texas for 2 years, 3 years, fairly recently. And I was down in Houston every month. I never remember shaking hands with, meeting anyone. I was going to marketing events and so forth, and never ran into anyone that said that they were a Texas fan. Nobody. They were Astros fans, but I did not run into any Texas fans. I can't think of a Texas fan. I know that they're out there. I know this is anecdotal evidence. I'm not saying it's scientific. I'm just saying, of course, based on where I've lived, well, when I lived in Connecticut, I don't know really that I ran into college football fans, period. Of course, in Ohio, I'm running into Ohio State and Michigan fans all over the place. When I was growing up, there were Notre Dame fans all over the place, in addition to Ohio State and Michigan fans. But I've spent time in Colorado, ran into all sorts of different fan bases out there that I can think of. Spent a lot of time in the last 10 or 15 years in California, and ran into USC and UCLA fans and other fan bases. But I don't know Texas, a Texas fan. Worked at ESPN, tons of college football fans there. I don't remember anyone being a Texas fan. Again, I'm sure it's happened in my life. But yeah, Texas is not the number one brand in college football. They may make the most money, but and that's part of the argument. I can understand that being a pragmatic, and it's a statistic, it's a fact, and that's what we major in here at the Voice of College Football. But this would tell me that Georgia has the second biggest brand in college football. That I would not agree with either. So if that money, those money figures, and they're significant, they should be counted, they should be part of the discussion, but they're not the end all be all, because I would not consider Georgia to have the second biggest brand in college football. Think of it this way. Who watches the games? When does Texas ever have a game that's watched in the vicinity of some other brands we could watch, that we could mention? Now, when they're on the same field with another enormous brand, sure. But for example, when Texas steps on the field against Kansas State, and these games are on ABC, it's not like they're hiding them somewhere on some Fox regional network. When they're stepped on the field against Kansas State or Kansas or Oklahoma State, they get good numbers. They don't get the numbers that Ohio State gets or Michigan gets when they play Maryland or Indiana or Wisconsin. They don't get those numbers. We looked at the TV ratings, which we do every offseason here at the Voice of College Football. Check out our TV ratings series, because that's interesting. And that's, I think that's a pretty substantial indicator of brand, is who's watching the football games. And you have to take into consideration where the games are being placed in terms of TV networks and time slots. Although we've gotten to a point in college football where the time slots don't matter that much, unless you're playing at 11 o'clock at night. That one does. But the other 3 time slots, there is no significance, little significance to when you're playing. Some of the highest rated games of the year played at noon Eastern time. And we know Fox has made that a thing. And then, of course, prime time is prime time, but also the 3:30 games sometimes rank as the biggest draws of the week. They're spread out. It all depends on who's playing and what network they're playing on. But if you're not getting picked up by Fox, NBC, CBS, or as a last resort, ESPN, then you're not playing a significant game nationally. I'm not discrediting teams that play on ESPN2 a lot. You see a lot of West Virginia TCU games on ESPN2. Not saying those aren't good football games, but they're not nationally significant, or they wouldn't be on ESPN2, or they wouldn't be on FS1. Except for when, and I'll just use them because they're the best example, because they're the biggest brands that play in a conference that have a contract that forced them. Well, you could say the same about the SEC and the SEC network, but Ohio State and Michigan have to play on the Big Ten network once. So even that game that they play on the Big Ten network is probably coveted, even though it's not a good game, to be placed on ABC. Look at Michigan. At the outset of both the 2022 and 23 seasons, they were playing horrendous opponents. And I believe just about all those games were on ABC. Not this past season because they were, of course, the Big Ten left ABC and ESPN. But the season before, Colorado State, Hawaii, who was the other team? Those games were on ABC. They got big ratings. Big ratings. More people watching Michigan play Hawaii and Colorado State than watch Texas play Kansas State or Oklahoma State. Really good teams. So our guy, Billy J, says that Texas is hurt by playing in a state with multiple teams. I guess. I would think that if you're a TCU fan, how many times does Texas play opposite TCU, Baylor, Texas Tech, Houston? And what real drain does that put on the Texas viewership? I don't know if those programs together exceed Michigan State by that much. Michigan State probably puts bigger drain on Michigan than those other schools. No, nobody's watching Houston play football. All right. Did not expect this to be a brand conversation here. And yes, Texas is an enormous state. So you're drawing from more people. That's a good point. That was just posted by our guy, Chicken 1515. So Ohio's got like 13 million people, and Michigan's got probably 10. And ballparking, and Texas has an outrageous number of people. It's the second largest state. All right, folks. Do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And we were hoping to get a check-in from Ole Miss and from LSU and another SEC media person checking in. Let me see where we stand on any of this. What else did we show on our X page today? We had some other good engagement here. So again, if you're just joining us, this started a bit of a debate. The top 10 brands in college football per our Justin Adams did not put Nebraska in the top 10. So let's give Justin a pat on the back for that. Bama 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, Michigan 4, Notre Dame 5, 6, Oklahoma, 7, Georgia, 8, Oregon, LSU, and USC to round out the top 10. Look at that guy. That's our lineup today. We've got the Texas Live Show with Matthew. You can join him there. You can argue about brands in college football. You could do that as well. That's at 7 p.m. Eastern Time over on the Texas channel. Please join Matthew. He is just a stalwart when it comes to Texas football knowledge. So he will be getting you all up to date on recruiting and prep for the 24 season and fall camp, and may approach the brand discussion and debate. We got our Trojan Conquest live show with myself, Tim, and Matt coming up at 10 Eastern, and Joey's got some trivia for you at 10:30 on the West Virginia channel. We are just 40 more days until week 0. Luke Kuechly, thank you so much for that. 40 days until kickoff. Florida State, Georgia Tech. If you've got a favorite number 40, let's have it. Favorite number 40. And then some of my favorite posts, at least that I create, I just kind of come up with these statistics myself. And this is the latest one from yours truly. It has to do with Clemson dominance from their heyday, 2015 through 20. And I just started to, it hit me, and I thought, I'm going to run through some of these numbers. I was actually doing work for one of the realignment videos. I think I was going through Clemson's run against the Big 12, which they've only played 6 games since 2000. And then it struck me, I thought, man, Clemson, they have just scheduled a ton of SEC teams because they play South Carolina every year. They've scheduled Texas A&M and Auburn, and of course, playoff games against LSU and Alabama. And so I thought, yeah, they did rather well against really good teams. Look at that. From 2015 through 20, that's 6 seasons, 11-3 against the SEC. And sure, South Carolina's in that. So South Carolina accounts for 5 of those. So 6-3 against everybody else. But still, they're playing great teams. Those teams went 1-10-35 against everyone else. And they also, against excellent Ohio State teams, some really good Notre Dame teams, went 5-2. And that's how good that run was with Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. All right, folks, appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We do expect more guests coming up throughout the week as we are bringing you SEC Media Days coverage each and every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time for the rest of the week. And then we are on into the ACC and the Big Ten next week. So there's going to be a 4 p.m. Eastern Time show every day this week with the SEC, next week with the ACC and the Big Ten. And then we are going live every day with a call-in show throughout fall camp, the college football season, all the way through. So be looking out for the program updates. I'll post a video where I outline our new schedule right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by. We will see you on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time with SEC Media Days number 2. And also tonight, the Texas shows at 7 Eastern, and you'll see me with Matt and Tim on the USC show at 10 Eastern. See you then.